So one thing really upsets me when I see these videos on YouTube of people who supposedly have test footage of the Sony A6700, but there is no proof that they have the camera, nor is there any description what kind of lens they used. It's so important to have lenses mentioned when you do camera testing because the lens sometimes I feel is more important than the camera itself. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. I'm still waiting for my Sony A6700. I don't have a clue when they're going to deliver it. No idea. I pre-ordered it on the first day that it was announced. And apparently I'm number 3 on the list now in all of the 7 stores they have in the Lower Mainland. But that didn't help me to get the camera at launch day because the whole entire store only got 2 cameras. And nobody knows anything. In the meantime, because I haven't got the camera yet, I have been wondering if I should look at the Fuji X-S20 again. And I have been. But I keep on thinking that I don't want to go back to the expensive Fuji lenses. And what I found when I was pricing out lenses was that for brand name lenses, for the aps-c lenses, Sony was just cheaper through the bench. I'm not saying that all of the Sony lenses are cheaper than the Fuji lenses, which is not true, but almost all of Fuji lenses are for aps-c, except for those medium format lenses that they have, or some of the highly specialized video lenses. They are just a lot more expensive. They're probably better made than Sony lenses, like the cheap Sony lenses, the G lenses, or even, but they're not necessarily better. So for the setup I needed here, it was a wide lens. I didn't want to go 11, that's just too wide. I had the choice between going with the 16mm Sigma f1.4 or the 15mm G lens from Sony 1.4. The reason I want the 1.4 is because this is an aps-c camera that I'm talking about. And aps-c cameras just have a lot less of a blurry background, a less bokeh background. So you have to go with a lens that has a very large aperture. And again, for the ones in the back of the room, larger aperture means smaller numbers. So if your lens is an f2.8, that's a large aperture. If a lens is like 5.6, that's a small aperture. So the diaphragm closes down. So you want the lower numbers, the ones, 1.4, 1.8, 1.2 if you can, 1.1. I don't even know they make those, but those are the lenses you want to have when you take pictures with aps-c for the low light capabilities and for that creamy, pleasing background bokeh. So there was these lenses that I was looking at, and as I mentioned in a previous video, the Fuji offering the 18mm is, or the 16mm f1.4 were both a lot more expensive than the 15mm f1.4 from Sony. We're talking $400, $500, something like that. Again, I was looking at cameras. I was looking at comparisons. A lot of Fuji fanboys are reviewing the XS20 and they think it's great. There are some people that think it's just a regular old camera. There's nothing special about the XS20. And the A6700 is just too new to really get real world reviews from people that have been using it for a while. I guess this also applies to the XS20 because that camera is fairly new too. I think it was launched in May. And in fact, if I'm going now and say, well, the A6700 from Sony is not available right now, how about I'm just gonna buy the Fuji camera instead? Can't. That's hard to find too. Like they're back ordered everywhere. We're talking body only, okay? I don't want to buy any more stupid kit lenses. Don't need them, don't want them. And while I'm thinking maybe I should give Fuji another try. Fuji has the better color, but I have tried Fuji for the last 10 years. It's time to try something new. I want to wait until the A67 gets delivered, and I want to give it a good try. And to show you that I have made this commitment to Sony, I did buy a lens, an E-mount, Sony E-mount lens. I had announced that last week. Sorry for the noise. So I did get the Sigma. 7 years Canadian warranty, you guys. 7 years. I got the Sigma 18 to 50 millimeter f2.8 lens after doing a hell of a lot of research about it. Okay, now you know me, or you don't know me, but who knows me? Whoever knows me knows that I'm not a fan of zoom lenses. Zoom lenses often have just a too small of an aperture or a variable aperture. Let's say the 18 is an f2.8, but the 50 is a 5.3 or something. And the thing is, when you're filming something and you zoom in or out, your aperture size will also reduce how much light goes in the lens. Sony makes a 16 to 55 f2.8 lens, but it is very expensive and it is bigger than what I want to put on my camera. So this is why I went with this Sigma lens. It's an aftermarket lens, and they have been around for a while, and they're made in Japan, and they're not cheap either, but I just couldn't pass it up. Why do I want a small lens if I have already a bulkier camera? I'm coming from the Fuji X100V. The body of that camera is not smaller than the Sony A6700, and it's not lighter. But the lens that camera comes with, which is attached to the body and you can't remove it, it's a 23 millimeter f2.0 that is like a pancake. It's tiny, it's small. And that's a camera combination that's been using for the last 3 years. One lens on the body. I took that with me everywhere. And I want to continue with this tradition because the one thing that I don't like about most cameras is that they are interchangeable lens cameras. That means you're never done buying lenses. You always look at, oh, there's a new lens that came out. Maybe I should buy that. Oh, if I want to take pictures of flowers, and I need a macro lens. If I need to take pictures of birds, I need a zoom lens. And then you end up having 15 lenses in your backpack, and you have these bags that are, I've been there. I don't want that anymore. That's why I switched to the X100V. But I also have a YouTube channel. So I needed a camera that was able to film. But I didn't want to bring two camera bodies with me because now we're looking at the whole thing again. I have this camera body and that camera body and they're all meant by, no. So in order to get a camera with a lens that does it all, this zoom lens that I just bought, this Sigma, it may do it for me. It's an 18, it's wider than the 23 that I had on the Fuji, and it's a 50, which is a perfect portrait lens. And it also has a really small focusing distance. So let's say, what does it say here? Minimal distance is 11 centimeters from the sensor. So the whole lens is only 8 centimeters. So that's pretty cool. This is great. A small focusing distance, and the X100V had that. So what are we getting now? We're getting approximately the same size camera body with a bigger grip. It's kind of an L shape of a camera. We get probably better battery life because the battery, big battery and that hand grip. We get a flip out screen that the X100V didn't have. We get a focus range from 18 millimeters to 50 millimeters and then some because of the clear image zoom that Sony gives you. So you can go a little further compared to a 23 millimeters focal length. And we're getting the same sensor, 26 megapixels, a viewfinder on both cameras with the X100V viewfinder better than anything. There's no comparison. But with the A6700, you have that much, much better video capabilities. You don't have film simulations. But to tell you the truth, I was not a big, huge fan of those film simulations. When people go nuts with those film simulations, that I don't enjoy that. So most of the time I would take the pictures always in the same simulation, and I just apply some other effects after. I know I said all these things before, but there are some people that ask me questions still in the comments, and I just want to point that out. I needed a camera that does it all, a true hybrid camera. And I wanted that camera to be small, compact, and easy to use in a sense. You bring it with you wherever you are, you take it out. And now having this new lens from Sigma that I can take landscapes with, and I can take portraits with, and I can take macros kind of with, that's just great. The image quality on this lens, from what I can see, is great. It's good enough for me. Everybody seems to love this lens. Why not me? Why do I have to be so against Sigma? What have they ever done to me? Nothing. They're just not Sony and they're not Fuji. This lens seems to be very well made. It's plastic, but there's a lot of Sony lenses that are plastic. The zoom ring is very, very smooth and very, very nice. There's a nice bit of resistance to it. Just because something is a brand name doesn't mean it's better. There are some awful, god-awful Sony lenses. I have one. I bought the 35mm f1.8, and it's god-awful. It has the worst purple fringing that you've ever seen. Chromatic aberration is my enemy. And I have to say this. Now, I'm filming this and I'm taking pictures right now with the ZV-10, but the Fuji never gave me any worry about chromatic aberration, ever. Never had a problem with that. The Fuji gave me horrible foliage. What is it called? Watercolor foliage. That's a different story altogether. But I never had to worry about purple fringing. With the Sony lenses, doesn't matter what lens I'm using, has more purple fringing, more chromatic aberration than any of the Fujis that I've ever tried. This one apparently has a little bit of it too. Not as bad as that 35mm though. And even the Sony, the G lens from Sony, the 15mm f1.4, even that has a limited amount of chromatic aberration. So I'm going to have to live with it. I'm going to have to work on it. If I really like that picture and I want to blow it up, print it, I will have to work on it. But for family pictures, who cares? It's going to be great. Nobody's going to zoom in 300% in a family picture. Who wants to see my nose hair? Nobody. This is the new lens that is going to live on my camera for most of the time when the camera is not sitting on a tripod in the studio. For now for the ZV-10 and for later for the A6700. That lens, by the way, was 699 Canadian dollars plus tax. So it's not a bad price. It's not a bad price at all for what you get. It's not weatherproof, but it is splash resistant in a way. And because there's a casket, is it a gasket? Not a casket. Casket is with dead people. Okay. There's a rubber ring. Okay. That's what I'm trying to say. There's a rubber ring on this lens. So the moisture is not going to get into your camera body. That's the main part. I have only had this lens for a day and a half. So I didn't really get the chance to use it that much. I took a couple of pictures of my husband and our cats. And I do enjoy using it. That I can already tell you. How do the Germans say? Immer drauf. An always on lens for this camera. Then the 15mm from Sony for my studio or night photography, or when I really need a big aperture, or even the landscapes, because this is only 18. The 15 goes a little bit further wider. So I may use that when I actually do take long exposure photography with my Nisi filter kit, like the stuff where you need the tripod for. Right. Speaking of overheating, I'm hearing more voices of people fighting with this camera overheating. It is an issue with the A6700, more so than with the ZV-10. Okay, there are photographers out there that are professional. And I believe a professional photographer should have a professional camera body. We're talking full frame here. We're talking expensive lenses. This is your tool. Like, I'm a graphic designer. I have an expensive Mac computer. I have a 5K screen. Okay, you have to have these items to do your job properly. When you are a enthusiastic amateur photographer, you have choices. If you're a beginner, you get one of those cheaper cameras, maybe cameras that are doing really well with automatic settings. Even Micro 3/4, do they even still exist? Something cheaper. And then when you realize this is a hobby that I want to continue doing, then you start spending more money on the camera bodies, on the lenses, etc. An enthusiastic hobby photographer that takes the camera out all the time, everywhere. That's the mid-range we're talking about. A6400, A6600, even some of the smaller full-frame cameras. But if you know that Sony launched the A6700 on July the 12th, if you knew that, you are more than an enthusiastic hobby photographer. You're a very, very enthusiastic photographer. So that camera then is for you because you know what you're looking for. You can justify spending this amount of money. That camera's for you. This is me. So, and if you are not going to stand in the sunshine for hours and end. You don't have to. You can be in the shade. You're not getting paid. And if you're getting paid, get better gear. Got it? Okay, sorry. My mom voice came out there for a moment. It may be the beginning of a long, beautiful relationship between me and Sony. I frankly don't think that the camera's going to arrive before September, but it could be any day. Like, they didn't give me any timeline. The first timeline was August the 3rd. I didn't make it on there. So now it's everybody's guess. The phone could ring right now and they can say, hey, Karen, your camera's ready. Come and pick it up. Forget it. All right. Well, here's again a quick update of my Sony situation. I hope you learned something and I hope I will see you again in my next video. Bye.